economic crisis, with the main event still to be seen, on top of the climate issues that we're already facing in our planet. And so we are all a bit shell-shocked by the situation and wondering what the future will bring. And I think we need trust in each other and trust in our institutions, the institution of our society. And I would say that to solve the issues that we face, no institution is more important than the business sector. And so business needs to be an integral part of the answer to the societal issues that we are facing. But this all will also happen if businesses also embrace in a certain way this agenda, the agenda for purpose, an agenda that goes beyond the focus on shareholder value, that even goes beyond the focus on the stakeholders' interests, on how to manage this or that stakeholder, and really embrace a different agenda. So for the seminar today, we will tackle this topic. We will start with an introduction by Professor Nuno Moreira da Cruz, who heads our Center for Responsible Business and Leadership, on the topic of purpose, introducing the research notes that the center is publishing today on this theme. And then it follows a conversation with Dr. António Casanova, CEO of Unilever FIMA in Portugal, and also Executive Vice President of Unilever, which is one of the companies that first embraced a purpose-driven agenda about a decade ago. So I'd like to learn a bit from this path that Unilever has developed, and also the experience of António Casanova as a business leader in this organization, embracing the theme of purpose with all of the challenges of being a pioneer. So we'll have also some time for questions at the end. And so I'm great to see so many people. We now reach 100 people in the webinar. So I'm happy to see so many people interested in the theme of purpose. And I will pass now to Nuno to share with us the research note and the insights that the center has been developing.
Thank you, Filipe, and thank you to everybody that is around. It's more than 100, as you said, Filipe. Thank you, António, for coming. It's fantastic. My first task is to try to share the screen. If this goes well, the rest will go fantastic. So let's see, sharing the screen. I think you are all with me now. So the task for me for the next, say, 10 minutes is basically to create context for the conversation between Filipe and António. It's an issue that is very high these days on corporate agendas, and understanding the context why this happens is very important. And that's the reason, if you want, why we've decided to write this research note that today we are publishing. My colleagues here will be putting it on the share, on the chat, so that you have a look as we go. My main task today is not to go in depth, of course, in 10 minutes in the research note, but just highlighting what you can find out in there when you go through it. I will. This is António. This is about Alan Jope. I know now. I understand how to say the name, Alan Jope, and I leave you to read. The only thing I can tell you is that if you Google CEO statements on purpose, you have dozens of them. This is the one that I've decided to choose and bring to this conference today. But it gives you clearly an idea how important purpose is on the agenda of this corporation. And why is that? Why is this happening? This gentleman that probably you don't, most of you don't know, is probably the professor around the world, I dare to say, that is doing a more in-depth work in the last 5 years, trying to understand the link between sustainability, purpose, and the bottom line. And this is the last article he wrote that basically says this, which I believe tells you why the CEOs are so into this, talking about the importance of purpose in the corporate agendas. So bearing this in mind, we wrote this research note. Purpose-driven business. We try to explore whether we are really talking about a sustainable competitive advantage, or it's just a fad that it's happening these days. And as you go through it, this is the third research note that we wrote this year. We had two in the same sort of trend that we wrote through since the beginning of the year. The first one was responsible business leadership. The second one in May was about COVID and the impact on the SDGs. So this is a trend that in terms of research notes that we are going to have. So this is the third in the year. This is the index that you will find in the research note. In the introduction, of course, there is somebody which is not unmute. And if anybody, there is a sound there, somebody which is not unmute. So we then talk about what is purpose. The third one is the evidence about the value of a purpose agenda, which is basically saying why is this important. And then finally, how to build a purpose-driven organization, because at the end of the day, it's all about execution and implementation, as we all know, that some of the times is the reason for failure in most of the companies. So what is purpose? The first thing to understand is that purpose is part of something, right? It's the whole concept of responsible business. When I put in the slide our definition, is the definition that we in the center came out with in the research notes before the beginning of the year. And this clearly says these four topics. One, companies that have sustainability at the core of the business strategies, an integrated view of stakeholders' interests, society's well-being, and purpose. So that's why we are talking about purpose now. And it was a privilege to write this research note. And I want to present my co-author. Under the supervision of our Dean, Philippe, which is passionate about this, and it's fantastic what he helped us writing this. Now, so what is purpose? Purpose, where most of people still make this deal, what is values, what is mission, what is vision, what is purpose? In our views, it's very easy. I mean, it's the way of saying purpose is why we exist. As easy as that or as complicated as that. Why do we exist as a company? And then we explore this as we go in the research note. We found 5 main features. Okay, the first one is what we call the reason for existence. Purpose, when we translate into Portuguese, which is propósito, in my view, doesn't bring the whole dimension of what a purpose is. I much prefer the French. The French, they call it raison d'être. That's how they translate. And that's why we say reason for existence is why do we exist as a company? Then the second thing is the decision-making guide. It's very important to have a purpose because it helps, creates the boundaries for your decision. And when you don't have anything to refer to, you have your purpose, and the purpose will guide you through any sort of decision, especially on investment decisions. Unifying factor, meaning that, I mean, we live more and more on what now it's called the stakeholder capitalism. I mean, if there is stakeholder capitalism means a lot of conflicting agendas between different stakeholders. The world was much simpler when it was all about the shareholder value creation. Now we are talking about a different animal, right? So you have to have something above the stakeholder agendas, which is what we call the unifying factor. Then it's about creating a sustainable development, a competitive advantage. A sustainable competitive advantage, which is sustainable, which lasts. And that's why it makes the difference comes from there. And finally, but not last but not least, understanding the ecosystem approach. Where do we sit? What are the trends in society? They need to understand everything that goes around the company so that we take the right decisions and the right strategies. These are a lot of corporate purposes that we cover in the letter, in the research note. Some are very much related with the core business, some are less related with the core business, but they all inspire us to understand why we exist, which is at the bottom of every single write. But of course, we make history. In research note, we have an historic perspective of the last 150 years. Where does this come from? And at least in the last 50 years, most of us, my generation, and at least two or three generations that followed, have always lived under this thing which is called shareholder value creation. And very much triggered by this gentleman, Milton Friedman, that said the only social responsibility of business is to make profit. I make a profit, I pay taxes, and somebody needs to deal with the environment and social issues. Until the gentleman that really made this definitely in the agenda of the corporate world, which is Larry Fink from BlackRock, who had brought this sense of purpose to the corporate world, understanding that is much more about, it's not only about short term. Of course, short term, we need the short term results, but it's all about long-term view. If we don't comply with the ESG metrics, environment, social, and governance metrics, there is no future. He insisted in that in the letter of 2019, purpose and profit, and that definitely those companies that were not following the purpose agenda it's not the case of Unilever, which has been in this at least for the last 7 or 8 years that Antonio will be explaining. Those that were more reluctant to do that, this made the difference. In fact, in Wall Street, they tend to say that it was a before and one after the letter. This is one of the studies that you'll find lots of these studies in the research note. I'm just highlighting some of them. I don't want to lose much time with them. This Philippe just mentioned this. One of the, when you ask the CEOs what is the most important thing in reputation, you have that on the top of that. The higher purpose is the highest threat to reputation in companies these days. So we get then to the second part of the research note, which is why is it important, or the value of a proposed agenda. And it's important for all stakeholders, and it's making a difference with all stakeholders. So first of all, it's important because investors are really caring more and more about this. The investment front is moving the thing in this direction. And we refer in the research note to many of these investment decision making. It is important because companies, I mean, lots of studies that show what is the difference in terms of financial performance for companies that really deal with purpose, you know, on a different scale. This is another study that you'll be finding in the research note. It is important because consumers, and here I want to highlight something. In 2 weeks' time, we are going to issue another research note, which will be only on consumers and consumption. So it's the idea of sustainable consumers that will be the target of the next research note. So in this research note, we just mentioned very briefly the impact on the consumers. So studies that you will be finding in 2 weeks in the next research note. But it's of course important because if employees are completely changing. The idea of attracting talent, we explore that in the research note. The importance for CEOs to understand that attracting talent these days is more about becoming a purposeful company. This is a study that has been doing recently by LinkedIn, where it proves the difference between purpose-driven companies which have better talent outcomes than others, and that you will also find in the research note. All of this leads us to the implementation, which is, if you want, companies can understand all of this, but then implementing this is very, very hard, and it's not easy. So how to build a purpose-driven organization? We propose a model, which is a model that tries to deal with all of these angles, trying to address an implementation that really has some chance of being successful. First of all, everything starts, of course, from commitment from the top. Without that, nothing can be done. But this is true for this. It's true for any sort of project that you want to move ahead in any company. But it's also understand that more than ever, this needs to come from the bottom. Bottom up. The concept of bottom up is absolutely, because it's this idea of purpose with. If you don't build a company which is the culture is born from bottom, it's very hard to implement any sort of purposeful company. The stakeholder dialogue, understanding the ecosystem, and the key words here are transparency and consistency. And without a very structured process to understand what the stakeholders want and which are their ambitions, is very difficult to implement anything that really has a chance of succeeding. Step number 4 is the statement of purpose. I mean, where you would need to include the 5 features that I was talking about, because a statement of purpose is a commitment, and you have to declare your commitment. Because if you don't declare your commitment, you always have a chance to just disappear from the commitment. So having a statement of purpose, building with the commitment from the top, build it bottom up, is in our view a success story. And then you have at least 3 other variables. One is the champions. You need to have champions to implement all of this. And then we all know in management, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. So it's very important to have the right metrics, the metrics that really matter to develop a purposeful organization. And again, last but not least, I mean, you have to have a clear link purpose to pay. It's not enough to have everything very nice, but then the incentives are linked to something else, which is not the purpose. So designing these with these 7 steps, we believe that is some chance of having implementation process that then delivers the implementation culture that we are expecting. Now, finally, I would like to leave you with this, which is, I think it's a good introduction for the interview between Philippe and Antonio. This is a company, Unilever, that really is moving the agenda here. And you can see just because of watching these numbers, numbers were quite impressive. I mean, numbers, what it's called the purpose business, the purpose brands deliver 70% of the turnover growth. So it's huge. And I'm sure Antonio will be referring to this. So on this mood, Philippe, I will pass to you, and I will be here watching the chat. And if there are interesting questions, I will pass them to Etienne, to Antonio and yourself.
Thank you very much, Nuno, for this great overview and for all the hard work on the research note. Maybe I would just add on my side that purpose is a concept that we are discussing and implementing at the business organizational level, but is also a concept at the individual level that I think relates and affects each one of us. And clearly Nuno is a person with a high sense of purpose in what he wants to do with his life. And that's also why he joined and launched the center with Catholic Lisbon. So thank you for all the purpose you've demonstrated and put into action with your team. And this really sets the background for the conversation with Antonio. And Antonio, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here, sharing these important issues with us. And as Nuno has described to us, this implementation of purpose-driven agenda is a process, is a path. And you don't just do like this and you have a purpose-driven organization. You have to walk, define the path and walk. And Unilever has been doing that as a pioneer, I would say, for many years, probably close to a decade. And so we have a lot of experience about that path when it was really difficult. It was not fashionable. And also, I would like to start our conversation a bit to understand, you've been leading Unilever in Portugal, also connected to Spain, very connected to Unilever globally as well. How did this topic emerge within Unilever? And how has it changed the company? If I look at other companies that I could name, like Procter & Gamble, that actually tried to acquire Unilever a few years ago, or others, is Unilever really a different company or not because of what has happened? And how would you describe that path? So let's start with there and then just flow the conversation.
Well, thank you. First, thank you for the invitation. It's always quite nice for us to talk about a main theme for the company. And to follow along what for us is really, in that sense, almost a route of evangelizing the rest of the business world, because we are completely aware that this is all very nice, but it will only get somewhere important if we persuade many of the other companies, mostly the big ones, but all along the business chain, that this is something incredibly relevant for business. So we are completely aware that this is a path that we are taking, but it's only the path gets much more relevant if we manage to bring along with us many other companies and many of our business partners. So it's always these events are always incredibly important for us to explain what we are doing and to explain why we think it's the only way to go about business. Truly, if you want to make it at a moment in time, although currently we said Unilever was already created as a purposeful company, in the sense that both Lord Lever, Hume, and the Dutch Van den Berg, when they created the companies, they had some idea of societal goodness. Lord Lever, this was over 100 years ago. Lord Lever had this idea that it was, we want to bring hygiene to everyone. So we want to make soap so cheap that the hygiene can be affordable. Okay, so and in that sense was a an original idea of purpose, of societal purpose. But really, in the recent years, this must be tracked to Paul Polman, which in 2010 joined Unilever's chairman, and brought with him this notion that we should be able, as a company. I think the first notion, the first big notion of purpose was the idea that as a company we had to decouple our growth from the impact on the planet. So that we should be able to grow without impinging upon the planet. Okay, and so we said, look, double growth and half your environmental impact. We as a company in a decade, we want to be twice the size we are now and be half in the overall impact we have on the planet. Okay, and this was the original idea. Then, of course, the thing is, okay, what really do you mean by impact? Because you can measure it in 1,000 different ways. So, and at the time there were 4 or 5 KPIs that that were defined 1 or 2 years later on. There were 4 or 5 KPIs of what one meant by societal impact. Okay, what was the sort of impact we were trying to avoid? This concept, which was inaugurated, I think, well, at least in Unilever by Polman, and truly, from what I can remember in the last decade, maybe some other companies of smaller size were already talking about it, Patagonia, for instance, but none of the really big ones was talking about this, you know, avoiding your impact initially on the planet, then on society, avoiding the impact that your growth will inevitably make. So bringing this back chronologically, there is this idea that Lord Lever already on the late 19th century developed a company that was positive in its social impact. But truly, in the modern history, this was created by to us, and I think to the companies in our industry, this was created by Polman and this initial vision that that growth had to be uncoupled from the impact on the planet.
Antonio, and what was the reaction, if you remember, because we know that bold ambitions from top management kind of die in the implementation by middle managers, focus on results. So do you remember what was the reaction that the management had with these ideas from Paul Polman? It's like, what is this crazy guy talking about? And this is impossible to achieve.
I think it was a bit like that. So I think in the end, I mean, if I talk about me and my colleagues, I think in the beginning, we were a bit split between the idea of this, whether this was truly a noble cause or a noble cause plus politically correct plus a great PR coup, you know, in the sense, you know, yes, okay, I understand the idea, but how serious are you about it? So, you know, when you have to decide between increasing your profit or dedicating money to the cause, what are you going to choose? And you know, everybody was a bit in the, you know, I think, I'm not sure everyone, but I know I was, and I know many of my colleagues were on this doubt whether, you know, okay, this is something that definitely sounds nice, completely attuned to the political correctness of today, but how serious as a company are you about this? Because I'm sure you remember that we were not educated on this. I mean, we were educated on the business school mantra of
shareholder value maximization.
Of maximization of the shareholder value, and of this great Wall Street idea of you want a friend, you buy a dog. So it was, we were all in that sense, my generation of managers is a generation that's still very much educated on the 80s and on this hard-nosed idea that that business is here to benefit initially its shareholders and its stakeholders, and the rest is up for the, then we pay taxes and then the government does the rest. So I'm exaggerating, but this was the sort of major concept that we learned with. So the idea that we had to change into a positive force for society was not completely obvious. And I think in that sense, there was a theme that became more and more important over time, with time, which was the idea that society will not forgive companies that did not bring about societal good, in the sense. And I think this was probably the transformation. This is all very nice, but if you're not seen as a force for the good, society will erase you soon. And I think in that sense, when I was perusing through the BlackRock note, he was saying something very much along these lines. Is companies that are not beneficial for society will not last. And if you want to be a company that lasts forever, society must recognize that you're good for it. Okay? Otherwise, just the sheer force of public opinion, key opinion formers, policy makers, etc., you'll bear a huge brand if they don't recognize you as a force for the good.
And it's interesting that you say that, Antonio, because even 10 years ago, you mentioned how bold a statement Paul Polman made about we have to double our growth while reducing to half our negative impact. And that was bold at the time, reducing our negative impact. But now the agenda is we need to be a force for positive change in society.
Yes.
Companies need to be a force for good and for positive change, and not only reducing harm. So reducing harm, reducing externalities is one face, one side of the coin. But like now, the pressure is for the other side of the coin as well, which is creating the positives.
No, and I think you're completely right. Because Felipe, I think this started from, look, we must be a force for the good. We must be seen as not doing bad, as not harming society. And now the bold step, I think, is society is a better place because you exist.
Yeah.
If our company did not exist, society will not be as good as is. Okay. So we are in that sense again a force for the good, but society, we want society to be better and quote unquote to be recognized as a positive contributor to society. Okay, be it because of the people we employ, of the salaries we pay, of the way we conduct business, of the way we approach our environmental themes, of the way we pay taxes, of the way we approach societal themes. Okay, we want to be a force for good. Okay, world is a better place because we exist as a business, and in that sense, there is. I'm sure you know this, but let me just reinforce this. There is this lady in another great university institution, which is Rebecca Henderson from Harvard.
Yes.
Which is now coming with Nuno to be one of the great hotspots of this way of doing business. And in that sense, she says one or two things which to me were very insightful. She says, look, capitalism is really not about making money. Capitalism is really a machine of innovation. It's a system that delivers results you ask him to deliver. Okay, is the most efficient way of going about delivering results. Okay, that's what capitalism is. And for a long time, you told capitalism, look, your main aim is to deliver profit for your shareholders. And capitalism went about all happy doing what you told it that it should be doing. And now you're saying to capitalism, look, your main aim is not really to, is not only, if you want, to deliver money for your shareholders. Okay? Your main aim is to deliver money to whatever, deliver value to society. Okay? And in that sense, you turn this machine of innovation, the most efficient system ever conceived by man, because think about it this way, there was never a social system so efficient and so good at delivering results as capitalism. Okay? And you turn this system on a different set of values and with a different objective. And I think, to me at least, this idea was very insightful. You know, that you said, look, you use what is the best machine, the best societal setup that it was ever developed, and you turn this societal setup into a different objective. Okay? The second thing that she says, which is to me also was a complete new way of thinking about it, was to say, look, companies are the best agents in any structure. No, it's not government, it's not ONGs, it's not transnational organizations, the UN, UNICEF, WHO. What changes the world are companies. One, they are much quicker at settling, at agreeing things than any government. If you think about it, what is changing the world, you know, with plastic reduction? Who is going about reducing plastic in the world, if not Unilever, Nestle, Procter, all the big companies that suddenly realize and say, look, this cannot go anymore. We are going of our own accord to have targets of plastic reduction. Because they were not given to us by governments. I mean, there is not even any government, target on plastic reduction, or if there is, not any meaningful one, and not any across the world. But it was the big companies that decided this is something that the consumer wants, and that we can deliver, and that we are going to be incredibly punished by our consumers if we don't deliver. Okay? And in that sense, were companies, big and small, that organize themselves to reduce plastic out of the system, in the sense knowing that the consumer will take it against them if in a few years' time they could not do it, and they were not seen as doing it. There is no plastic reduction target in Portugal, in Spain, in France, in Italy. There is none. But you know, you see the amount. I mean, gosh, I'm drinking water from a paper cup. 3 years ago, I'll be using a plastic bottle. There was no government law or tax that made me do it. I mean, there are now taxes, but most of the taxes come more as a way of reaping a benefit for government than as an incentive to do it. So the main idea was, the other second big insight is like, companies are the best way to go about this, because they are much quicker. They are the biggest meritocracies in the world. If there is a meritocracy, if people generically of talent flock somewhere, they flock to companies. They have the best management. You know, if you, I'm generalizing, but you know, if you take the idea, they've got the best government. They attract the best talent. They are much quicker at organizing themselves. They are much quicker at striking deals, and they are much quicker at implementing. So if anybody is going to change the world, it's not going to be governments or transnational organizations. Who's going to change the world? Our corporation. Okay, and this is the second insight from Rebecca Anderson. And these two, I think, to me, strike, at least to me, strike very much the tone of the way to think about business and capitalism, if you want, for the whatever, for the near future. Then what will come, I don't know. But
Antonio,
to me,
let me, on that note of the vision for capitalism, let me just add a note to that, because I love the idea of capitalism being this distributed, very efficient machine for innovation, for delivering results. And we have, as a system, as you said, pointed that machine to one goal, returning value to financial capital. And so people associate capitalism with financial capital. And maybe at the time in the 60s or 70s, when financial capital was scarce, it made sense to reward the scarcest resource at the time, which was also the fungible resource that allowed to buy other resources. But in the current context, where financial capital is no longer scarce, there's trillions and trillions of dollars and euros in the system trying to find an investment opportunity, and often not being able to find that investment opportunity. There's a lot of the bubbles and speculation, when maybe the real scarce resource is livelihoods or talent or other things. We can indeed divert this machine of innovation to other goals, potentially, as you said, with great and amazing results. So that's, I think, a great insight and a nice inspirational one. We are all part of this journey to shift a bit this machine to a goal that serves us all better for the next set of challenges that we need to face. Can you, because some people may say, well, this is all good and Unilever and changing, but how specifically has Unilever did things differently or changed its portfolio of products or had a higher level of demand in terms of processes? Can you point to 2 or 3 things that Unilever does that would not normally a company would do, but you felt the need to do them because of the agenda that you were embracing?
Yeah, and it's a path that is not always completely clear. So not here with the idea that this is completely as obvious as mathematics. So these days, our logic is really threefold. So first, companies with purpose last, which sort of comes from this idea that society will not bear in the medium term companies that are not positive, okay, not positive to society. So companies with purpose are the companies that last. If you want to last 100 years, society must believe that you're good for it. Okay? Otherwise, sooner or later, you'll start getting hiccups on your path. The second thing is, in a company like ours, really the way we touch society and mostly consumers is through brands. Okay, so companies with purpose last, but to us the way to go about it is with brands. So the second idea is, so brands with purpose grow, or brands with purpose last if you want. But in order for this to be impactful, your brands must have a purpose. Okay. Third, this cannot be achieved if the people in the company do not have a purpose themselves. So you could not have a company where you sell brands and you want a company with the purpose, but that the persons in the company themselves go about their business without this intent in mind. And we grew this. Well, first, this is a recent definition. It's a definition from 2 years ago, but really encapsulates something that it was already sort of brewing there. And it really all started from this idea that we want every employee, first in the beginning, more white collars, but now going on to blue collars, really. We want every employee to have a purpose. Okay, we want everyone to have an idea of why does the world change because you exist or because of your work. Okay, and we would want, and we are really trying hard, that everybody in the company has got a sense of what, of a purpose, of why do they exist, how do they want to go about life, and how does he work, does his work fit on this notion of good, which sometimes can be things outside work, but they really shouldn't, and sometimes can be things where they feel Unilever is not the best vehicle for that. Okay, and then some of them might have to change work in a country where this is easier than Portugal, but that's a completely story where there's more alternatives. But still, that you should have this first idea that your idea of going about the world should have a place in the company where you work. Okay, so there's these three center system, these three central ideas. So, and going on, just this idea of a purpose is a very powerful idea for an individual, okay? Because it brings about the idea that when you go to work, you go for more than making the money and living a life besides it. You know, work is an essential part of your path in life and your path in the planet. Second, if you stick to this idea, of course, every day you want to do something for it, and of course, so you cannot have a purpose and then go about business on a way that is detrimental to your purpose or detrimental to society.
So kind of consistency, right? You need to live in a line and consistent way.
Because especially if you start, if this idea is completely developed in the company and around you, it really sort of, there's an English expression, but
surrounds you and
surrounds you and sort of makes you zoom into a specific way of going about this. Then probably the best way to go, there are examples in companies, of course, with, there are now in this pandemic, we said we will devote 1 billion euros to parts of the society which were more hit by this, etc. But I think at the end of the day, the ones that are more important are probably around our brands. And one key idea is that we want every brand to have a purpose. Okay. Now, this is a tough path because some of them are quite obvious, and I'll come to one or two which are quite obvious. 3 or 4 are tougher. So, what is the purpose behind a mayonnaise? Or what is the purpose behind? Let me get the tough one. Toothpaste. Okay, so if we want to be a purposeful company, our brands have got to get purpose. And everybody, and the spirit of the brand is, why does this brand existing? Is this good English? Why does the existence of this brand improve the planet? Some are easy, some are not. Easy ones, probably the most, by the way, and as Nuno was saying in the beginning, one of the key things is brands with purpose seem to be incredibly more powerful to the consumer than brands without purpose. And most of our growth comes from brands with purpose. Okay. They are growing much faster than brands that don't have a purpose. Now, of course, you could always argue that causality is not correlation. So you say, yes, okay, there's a few things around the brands with purpose. They tend to be the biggest. They are the best brands. They are the ones where you develop the purpose first. They are the ones with the easiest footprint. Okay, there are stories around there. But anyway, there's an idea there that brands with purpose seem to be more attractive to the consumer than brands without purpose. The most obvious example usually is Dove. Okay, Dove and the idea of let's say of embracing diversity, you know, that Dove really brings about. So the story about around Dove is very simple. is Dove at this point in time is mostly about what should I say? Self-confidence, feminine self-confidence. So we know two things. Women, like men, with more self-confidence deliver better results. Okay, they are able to have more impact, and with that, they are able to deliver best results. So the correlation is people with more self-confidence deliver better results wherever they are. In business, in life, they achieve more. If you've got more self-confidence, you achieve more. Second, a very small part of women, like of men, have self-confidence in the sense that they don't consider themselves beautiful. I think the number is like 20% of women, when asked, consider themselves pretty. Okay, 80% consider themselves either standard or not pretty. And you know, the prettier you consider yourselves, the more impact you have on society. Third step: why don't you consider yourselves? Why does one not consider oneself pretty? Because the standard of beauty in society are very narrow. Okay, because there is the archetype or the stereotype of what beautiful means is quite narrow. So it means a different, a given skin type, a given color of eyes, a given color of hair, a given height, a given body shape, etc. Okay. If you conform to this standard of beauty, your chance of having higher self-esteem increases. Now, we know something else. This is completely a feature of current times, because what was considered beauty has changed a lot across the centuries.
Yeah,
I mean, what we consider beautiful, it was not written in stone and given to us at the top of a mountain, a theme that Católica knows about. But this was not, it was not delivered to us like this. It's something that was sort of shaped, and it changed a lot of times. So why do we believe that there is only one type of beauty? Okay. And one of the big things around Dove is unstereotyped beauty. Show to the world that beauty has meant 1,000 different things and can mean at this point in time across the globe 1,000 different things. So it's not by being a very specific type of quote unquote, and I'm exaggerating, but just to make the point of, it's not by being an exact type of Hollywood beauty that makes you beautiful or not. Yeah. There are 1,000 other types of beauty. So to cut a long story short, the full idea around Dove is this idea of unstereotyping beauty and showing the world that there are 1,000 different things that mean beauty, and as such, that you don't need to conform to a given archetype to be considered beautiful, and breaking this link that you can increase your self-esteem. And how do you do it? Of course, you do it by showing different type of people on advertising, showing, you know, and stereotyping your advertising, showing many different types of people in relevant roles, etc. Okay, so this is the journey of Dove, and Dove is probably the biggest one. But there's 20 other.
And what you mentioned reminds me 2 points. One is that you mentioned the power of the norms, and that we take a norm usually as an absolute thing that shapes our life, and we are not able to see that norms evolve, and sometimes they are wrong. And so I think what social innovators, that's my area of research, do is often they see the world as it is and not with the filters that we impose on people. And by seeing the world differently, they come up with solutions that actually are very innovative and create a lot of value. because they don't have the same biases that other people have. And you are saying to some extent that a company, in terms of finding a purpose for its brand, sometimes it's useful to have kind of this similar approach as a social innovator of looking at things differently and looking at what's important and what people are told. So that's an interesting idea. The other, which is quite challenging, but at the same time very exciting, is that when we speak about a purpose-driven organization, is not only finding the purpose for the organization, but often the organization provides different products or services. In the case of Católica, we have an undergraduate program, we have executive education, we have research. And so finding a way in which each of our products or services embodies a certain purpose that often is emanated from the bigger purpose, but sometimes could be one that is identified for that specific product or brand. That's very important. So you need to apply purpose at different levels, right? At level of the organization, but also potentially, in the case of consumer organization, at level of the brand, which leads to a lot of creativity for different people managing the brands to find the purpose of the brand. So that's quite nice. Let me ask you something that maybe has a final question, because our time is short. Is you have been working for many years in Portugal, but also connected a lot with the global business context. How you see currently the difference in terms of level of development of thinking and action in Portugal versus the rest of Europe, Western Europe, in terms of the issue of purpose? Do you see that we are lagging behind, that we see that in some areas we are further ahead? What needs to happen, I think, in Portugal, specifically for the agenda to move faster?
If I compare ourselves with what I saw in Spain and what I see from my European colleagues, is probably that at least in my industry, but I will dare to say in many of the other industries, the themes that society worries themselves about are slightly different. Okay, as a society, and probably with very good cause. You will see often all the Nordics very worried about all the environmental impact, okay, which I think in Portugal is relevant. You'll see that many of the other ones also worried about integration of specific, specific communities, which tends to be a big theme, for instance, in Germany. Okay, but in our sense, I think we as a society, at least, we tend to be more worried about things like social inequality. Okay, which I think in Portugal is a theme that rings bigger bells than it rings in Northern Europe. Okay, so I think the themes change over time, and they are different from places in Europe to places in Europe. If I had to say one thing that I think is more recurrent in Portugal, is the theme of inequality. Okay, and I think this comes mostly from the fact that as a country, we are, how shall I put this to be nice? I think as a country, we failed our objective of developing our economy over the past 20, 30, 40 years. And this failed objective has brought about a sub-theme that, not being able to develop, we are more worried about sharing how we share it. And I think we'll probably be less worried about sharing if we will be more successful at developing the economy. I mean, and I think it's one fact that does not get referred to me as often as it should, is that on this century, only 2 countries in the world have dropped more places in the economic ranking of nations than Portugal, which were Greece and Venezuela. We are the 3rd country in the world that has dropped the most places in the economic ranking. The other incredible thing is that if you take the last half a century, if you take the last 50 years, not really 50, 46, okay, we have not converged with the richest countries in Europe at all. We are at the exact percentage of GDP per capita as we were 45 years ago.
Despite all of the European funding and all of the
European integration. We only converged for 3 or 4 years of heavy European funding. All the other time, we have lost. And the other thing, which is even more worrying, is that now we are diverging. So in 10 years' time, we will be worse off in percentage of the GDP of the richest countries in the world than we were half a century. 60 years off, we are worse off than we were at the beginning. And, you know, gosh, and to me, if you want, you know, what is something that worries you and where it consumes your time and energy thinking, is to try and address this incredible incapacity as a society to create wealth.
I wanted to address a question that was, we are now close to the time, but I'll ask everyone 5 minutes more. There's a very interesting question here by Frederico about the role of partnerships, so especially cross-sector partnerships, in the sense that businesses are a tremendous engine for innovation and they can help change the world, but often they cannot do it alone without involving and engaging others, immediately other people in their sector, maybe even their competitors, but also people from the United Nations and other organizations and governments. Is Unilever also very active in this front of developing cross-sector partnerships and tackling some of these big issues together with others? How do you see the importance of this team?
No, I for one am a bigger advocate of intercompany partnerships than anything else, because I think companies work well. Other organisms sometimes do, sometimes don't. Okay, but it's true that some organisms, I'm not sure organisms is the best way to. Some institutions have had an impact in the world that is incredibly important, and to bring about the theme which is incredibly dear to us was already a bit dearer, because and actually, if you think about it, one of the reasons that why we sold a very important business was because it was very difficult to be able to be squeaky clean doing that business, which is everything to do with palm oil, okay, which is a tricky area. But anyway, the whole idea of, you know, tracking palm oil, making sure that all palm oil comes from with the reforestation certificates, that you make sure that for every palm you take, you're replanting all the time. Okay, so all of this can only be done, or is better than even for the international, for the world, being controlled, etc., with partnerships from NGOs, which are very strong in this area. Okay, so yes, there are lots of, especially in agriculture, many of our objectives get controlled or get delivered in the end through NGOs that work in these areas. But there are thousands of examples of others, you know, Red Cross, etc. So I wouldn't. I fully recognize that there are incredibly potent organizations in these areas, and many of them are crucial for us to deliver on the targets we've set ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. So I'll just pass to Nuno. So I really enjoyed our conversation. There are some clear ideas that I take. One, I think this is really a powerful idea of these. We have this excellent machine for innovation globally, that we need to redirect it to the right or to the most important uses for the future on one hand. And also this issue of purpose, we really need to understand it at multiple levels, not only the level of the company, the organization, be it a business, be it a business school, be it any other organization, but also at the level of the brand or the product or service that we are delivering, but also at the level of the individual, not only as leaders in our organizations, but also each one of us as citizens. And I think the question that you phrased, society is a better place because I exist. Can I really with confidence say this statement for the past, present, and future, and knowing why is it better off? And if not, then maybe I should do some thinking in terms of what my purpose in life is and what I want to achieve. So those are some, I think, interesting ideas that I get from this conversation. So thank you, Antonio, for sharing your thoughts with us, and thank you for the work that Unilever has been doing in the area of sustainability and purpose as a pioneer. Now, one among many others, sharing a common agenda, and hopefully in partnership with others, implementing it for the benefit of the planet. I have a couple of final words. Nuno, anything you'd like to say as a closing?
Well, maybe just building two comments. One, building on what you just said. I mean, this question of purpose, and thank you very much, Antonio, because when you put the personal dimension into all of this, makes a lot of sense, because it's all these personal purposes that leads to something different. It always reminds me of the story of, you know, those two guys which are breaking stones, and you ask the first, what are you doing? And he says, I'm breaking stones. And the other one says, no, I'm building a cathedral. So the companies that are able to convince employees that they are building a cathedral will make the whole difference. So thanks for that, Antonio. And the other comment I would like to make, which is, it's always reassuring to listen to companies who have this potential to change the world and driving all the rest of the ecosystem with them, is this notion that, of course, without economic sustainability, there will never, ever be social sustainability or environmental sustainability. But what is more and more true is that without the social sustainability and the environmental sustainability, we will not have economic sustainability. So that's the agenda that you are driving, and I thank you for that.
Great. So thank you very much, Antonio. Thank you also, Nuno, for the work you've been putting in the center with your team, with Filipe and Vera. And just a note that we are continuing to working in this area, not only developing research notes, but also developing new education training programs. And we are launching next week a very innovative, fully online program with customized content on the purpose-driven business. That also includes some videos from Antonio and many other CEOs that agreed to share their insights. And so the course, the executive education course, will start next week. And Filipe can share briefly and has shared already the link to the course. And that is a way for us. I always say there's no better way to learn something than having to teach it. So when we have to teach and train and educate and share about purpose, we are also learning about it and getting our knowledge and developing our knowledge. So this is what we've done here, develop our knowledge and virtually together in terms of this important agenda of the purpose-driven business. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your patience for these extra 8 minutes that we took. I think it was worthwhile. All the best to everyone. And may each one of us find our purpose in life and enact it now and in the future. Thank you very much. All the best. And thank you, Antonio, again.
Bye.